Welcome to the Canadian Beef Cattle Podcast, presented by the Beef Cattle Research Council. The most popular content from beefresearch.ca, available on the go. Before we get into this week's episode, a quick message from the BCRC.
Ensuring newborn calves consume colostrum is one of the most important management strategies cow-calf operations can implement to promote healthy calves. Colostrum provides essential antibodies to a calf with virtually no immune system. Colostrum also contains fats, vitamins, proteins, and other immune cells essential to provide the calf energy, warmth, and the local immunity it requires to thrive in the first few days of life. It is crucial for producers to observe newborn calves to make sure they have received colostrum and to intervene if necessary. Learn more about handling colostrum by clicking the link in the show notes. This episode is titled Polycrops: Challenges, Triumphs, and Valuable Lessons from Beef Producers.
Hi, I'm Stacey Domilewski with the Beef Cattle Research Council. Polycrop forage blends have become a popular tool among beef producers to increase soil health, manage grazing, improve cow performance, and enhance resilience to changing weather conditions. However, as with any farming practice, the result can vary based on location, weather, and management strategies. The practice of using polycrops, also known as cover crops, forage mixtures, or cocktail crops, is intended to increase the diversity of plant species in a pasture. Increased plant diversity can enhance soil health, increase water infiltration, reduce fertilizer needs, and provide higher quality forages for cattle. One of the objectives of the Living Lab Central Prairies has been growing polycrops on producer operations and evaluating both the long and short-term impacts. The Living Labs program allows producers like Erica Stewart, John Griffin, and Carmen Jackson to use polycrops on their operations, and they have encountered both success and challenges with the practice. Their experiences, combined with insights from agricultural research, highlight the complexity of adopting polycrops and offer valuable lessons for others considering this practice. Carmen Jackson shares about choosing the right crop to meet your goals. Carmen Jackson, who operates a farm southeast of Regina, Saskatchewan, takes a measured approach to polycrops. You can't just jump in without understanding the risks, she advises. Carmen and her family manage 3,500 acres, including 900 acres of rented land, most of which is native grass, with a small portion, approximately 400 acres, seeded to forages for winter feeding. When it comes to polycrops, Carmen emphasizes the importance of making small, deliberate steps when implementing new practices. Even if things aren't going perfectly, you have to keep moving forward, she says. Carmen and her family have been using polycrops for the last 5 years. They started after attending a workshop in Manitoba and have been experimenting with them since. The most important thing I've learned, and that we did wrong the first year, is you need to understand the context that you're using polycrops for, she says. She has seeded polycrops in multiple locations on her farm, but points out that there are different goals, and each goal requires different grazing strategies. For example, on one pasture, the goal was to increase pasture biomass. Carmen noted it was a saline, low-yielding piece of ground they were trying to improve. For the pasture, they seeded a polycrop blend and did some late fall grazing, turning a group of cows out to allow them to both trample and graze the forage. The residual forage left behind was targeting adding organic matter with the long-term goal of improving soil conditions. In another pasture, the goal was a high-quality feed on which to background their bulls. This piece was cross-fenced, and bulls were moved through the paddocks in late summer. This year, Carmen hopes to be able to graze in both summer and then fall regrowth. Carmen works with a professional agrologist to build forage blends that meet the needs of their operation and chooses a different blend based on the goal for the pasture and if they intend to graze or make silage. It's probably more advantageous to come up with something that you think will work on the soil you have. Carmen notes that she is more comfortable using a pre-made blend on good land, but on land that requires soil improvements, she finds value in choosing crops that are tailored to their specific goals. When choosing forage blends for silage, Carmen points out that first and foremost, we have to feed our cows, so tonnage is my number one priority. I try to add in something to help with soil health, but it can't take too much away from the total volume. It's a bit of a dance. You just need to adjust as you go. Economics and knowing how her land performs also play a role in what Carmen chooses for a forage blend. She points out that in some of the poorer soil areas, yield is limited, and she needs to be conscious of what she spends on a mixture to make economic sense. With this mindset, Carmen points out that even in the saline or other problem areas, they may be able to spend a little bit more on polycrops than a monoculture, as they don't use any fertilizer and there may be long-term benefits. Carmen acknowledges that polycrops may not always deliver immediate or dramatic results. However, she stresses that the soil health benefits accumulate over time. Sometimes you just have to adjust as you go, she notes, including that experimentation is part of the learning process. Next, we hear from Erica Stewart on the importance of adaptation and pivoting. Erica Stewart and her family farm near Morse, Saskatchewan, and have recently started integrating polycrops as cooperators in the Living Lab Central Prairies. Their farm consists of primarily native grass with some cultivated land that they use to put up winter feed for cattle. She notes the challenges that come with unpredictable weather, especially when drought conditions persist. If moisture doesn't come, it's really hard to make cover crops work, Erica explains. She also mentions the trial and error nature of polycrop management. Erica is still working out how polycrops fit into their operation. In 2021, they experimented by growing small amounts of 2 different blends marketed by separate companies. In late May, they seeded a combined 230 acres side by side and found that both did well despite drought conditions. With that success, the next year they seeded 240 acres of a polycrop blend for silage. Once again, it performed well. We'd gotten 2.5, maybe 3 inches of rain and had enough silage to make it through the winter, so we were thrilled, Erica says. Unfortunately, they were not as successful the following year. Despite having similar rainfall, we had planned to swath graze in that year, but it wasn't even worth driving the swather over. Instead, we fenced it out into 4 paddocks, and I think we got about a week's worth of grazing off of it, says Erica. Despite trying a drought-tolerant blend last year, they had similar results, as well as issues with weeds. Weeds weren't an issue when things were growing, but now, after 2 years of crop failure, it's a big problem, she says. For Erica, nitrates have also been an issue. The brassicas that we used to improve soil health were great, but due to drought, when we did our feed tests, the nitrates came back super high. They were still able to salvage the feed by allowing the pasture to rest. Then, grazing in a small paddock with gates open to a perennial pasture with water. That way, the cows could go in and graze, but they didn't stay in there since there was no water, and it forced them to come out and eat something else. Even with having issues in the past couple of years, Erica thinks polycrops could still play a role in their operation. We added some winter triticale to last year's blend, so hopefully we'll see that pop up for some early spring grazing to allow us to rest our perennials longer. She also wants to try grazing the polycrops earlier in the season and using them as a high-quality forage during the breeding season. Erica remains committed to experimenting with polycrops. She emphasizes that understanding the local conditions and being flexible with the approach is key. You have to tweak things as you go, she reflects. Acknowledging the learning curve associated with integrating new practices into an operation. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's all part of the journey. Finally, we hear from John Griffin on the importance of context and flexibility. John Griffin and his family have both irrigated and dry land near Central Butte and Bridgeford, Saskatchewan. Over the years, they have transitioned from a purebred herd calving in winter to a commercial herd that calves in May. With the adjustment of their calving season, they have come to rely on swath grazing for winter feed. John has been experimenting with how to add polycrops into their system and has had both success and learning experiences. Drought and grasshoppers resulted in complete crop failure the first year they tried polycrops, but being a part of the Living Lab Central Prairies gave John the opportunity to try seeding them again. John has been experimenting with both a commercially available complex mixture as well as a simple mixture with peas and a cereal. He uses a hoe drill with a 2-sided gravity wagon to seed both mixtures. The 2 sides work great, John says. I put the peas in one side and the oats or barley in the other side, then just hand dribble in the complex mixture on top of the barley for those fields. He points out that the box drill is nice as the seed cups can open to allow bigger seeds like peas to get through. Last year, both mixtures grew well, but he noticed in the complex mixture most of the biomass was coming from the peas and oats. Based on that and higher cost to the complex mixture, John plans to proceed with a simple cereal pea mix in the future. Like Erica, John wants to use Polycrops as a high-quality forage during the breeding season to improve his conception rates. We have very productive spring pastures because we get snowmelt, but then it dries up and turns brown. So we don't have a high-quality feed when we need it in August when the bulls go out. This past year, he turned the cows and bulls out onto the Polycrops to graze during the breeding season. In addition, John points out that research staff through the Living Labs are taking measurements on soil health, which may have long-term benefits for his pasture. Maybe over time we will see benefits that I'm not noticing yet. But from a beef production standpoint, if I can get a few more cows bred at that time of year, then they would be benefiting us. Talking to other producers who have used Polycrops has been helpful, but John highlights that taking your own climate into account is important. For example, he knows other farmers who've had a lot of success including turnips and other brassicas in their polycrop blends, but on their place, flea beetles decimate the plants before they can get going. John's experience echoes the broader sentiment among producers. Polycrops can be an excellent tool, but their success is highly dependent on factors like weather, species selection, and management practices. John has appreciated being a part of the Living Lab Central Prairies as it has given him an opportunity to test out research results on his own farm. He believes that while research provides valuable insights, it's essential to understand the local context and conditions. What works well in one area may not necessarily be successful in another. Research insight, starting small and choosing the right mix. Aklilu Alamu, a researcher with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and research lead for the Living Lab Central Prairies, recommends that producers looking to integrate polycrops into their operation should start small and simple until you're familiar with the practice. Selecting the right mix of polycrops is important, especially when moisture is limited. If the moisture is not coming, the cereal component of the polycrop mix can still provide some biomass, Aklilu explains. This strategy helps ensure that even in dry conditions, producers can still benefit from the polycrop's contribution to soil health and grazing. Aklilu cautions that field conditions are highly variable and what works in one place may not work in another. This aligns with the experiences shared by producers like John Griffin, who have found that what works in research trials doesn't always translate directly to real-world conditions. Aklilu says there are 3 things producers should think about when implementing polycrops. Number 1, moisture is the number 1 factor that will influence success. Number 2, start simple and start small. And number 3, start with at least 40% cereal in your first year. This way, if other crops fail, you should still have some biomass to salvage. Key takeaways from this article: trial, error, and adoption. The experiences of producers like Carmen, Erica, and John illustrate the unpredictable nature of integrating polycrops into a beef operation. While some years may yield impressive results, others may bring challenges such as pests, poor weather, or suboptimal crop growth. The key to success lies in adaptability, local knowledge, and a willingness to experiment.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. You can find all relevant links and information at beefresearch.ca or in the show notes. The Beef Cattle Research Council is funded by the Canadian Beef Cattle Checkoff and strives for excellence in the production of Canadian beef, cattle, and forage through research, innovation, and extension. Tune in every Tuesday as the Canadian Beef Cattle Podcast delivers straightforward insights, expert information, and a wealth of practical knowledge for Canadian beef producers. Subscribe now.